What would you do if the sky suddenly erupted with the sound of thunder, but there were no clouds? If the ground beneath your feet began to shake like an earthquake, but no seismic activity was detected? This is exactly what German forces experienced for the first time during World War II, when they encountered something that would fundamentally change the nature of modern warfare. American artillery coordination that could deliver thousands of shells to a target in mere seconds. On a cold February morning in 1943, during the Battle of Kasserine Pass in Tunisia, German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel would write to his wife about something that deeply impressed him. He described watching American artillery fire with a precision and coordination that seemed almost supernatural. What Rommel witnessed that day was the result of a revolutionary military innovation developed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, a fire direction system that could coordinate dozens of artillery batteries to strike a single target simultaneously. This is the story of how American military innovation transformed the battlefield forever, and how one tactical breakthrough became the hammer that would help drive the steel spikes into the coffin of the Third Reich. To understand the magnitude of this transformation, we must first examine the state of artillery warfare before America entered World War II. In 1940, American artillery was equipped with obsolete French guns from World War I, transported by horses and unreliable trucks. The US Army had suffered from 20 years of neglect by civilian authorities, and its artillery branch was considered one of the weakest among major military powers. Meanwhile, Germany possessed some of the most advanced artillery pieces in the world. The famous 88mm guns, originally designed as anti-aircraft weapons, had proven devastatingly effective against both aircraft and ground targets. German artillery crews were battle-tested, having honed their skills during the Spanish Civil War and the early campaigns of World War II. Their guns were precise, powerful, and operated by experienced crews who understood the deadly choreography of indirect fire. But here's the intriguing contradiction that would reshape the war. While Germany possessed superior individual weapons and experienced crews, they were about to encounter something that no amount of battlefield experience could have prepared them for: a completely new approach to artillery coordination that would make their impressive individual capabilities seem almost primitive by comparison. The revolution began in the 1930s at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, home of the U.S. Army Field Artillery School. Under the leadership of Director of Gunnery Carlos Brewer and his dedicated instructors, a group of American artillery officers began questioning fundamental assumptions about how artillery should be employed. They weren't satisfied with the traditional method of having individual batteries adjust their fire one gun at a time, a process that was slow, inefficient, and gave enemies precious time to seek cover. These innovative officers faced significant resistance from traditionalists within the military hierarchy. Many senior commanders believed that the tried and tested methods of World War I were sufficient for modern warfare. The idea of coordinating multiple batteries to fire simultaneously seemed unnecessarily complex and potentially dangerous. What if the calculations were wrong? What if friendly forces were caught in the crossfire? Despite this skepticism, the Fort Sill team pressed forward with their revolutionary concept. They abandoned the practice of massing fire by described terrain features and instead introduced a firing chart system. They adopted the practice of locating battery positions through precise survey methods and designated targets with reference to specific points on their charts. Most importantly, they developed what would become known as the Fire Direction Center, a command post that could coordinate the fire of multiple artillery batteries with unprecedented precision. The breakthrough came in the spring of 1931, when the gunnery department successfully demonstrated massing battalion fire using their new method. For the first time in military history, dozens of guns could be coordinated to deliver their shells to a target at exactly the same moment, creating what they called time on target, or TOT fire missions. The concept of time on target represented a fundamental shift in military thinking that would reshape the very nature of battlefield dominance. Traditional artillery doctrine focused on the individual gun or battery as the basic unit of fire. Gunners would fire, observe the impact, adjust their aim, and fire again, a methodical process that could take minutes or even hours to achieve the desired effect. This gave defending forces ample time to seek cover, reducing casualties and the psychological impact of the bombardment. The American innovation challenged this approach by recognizing a crucial battlefield reality that had been overlooked for centuries. Most casualties from artillery fire occur within the first few seconds of an attack. During those initial moments, enemy troops are typically standing in the open, unprepared for the incoming barrage. After the first few seconds, soldiers dive for cover, dramatically reducing the effectiveness of subsequent rounds by as much as 66%. Studies conducted by the US Army revealed the precise timeline of this phenomenon. At the moment of impact, only 9% of soldiers were prone, 33% had some cover, and 58% remained completely exposed. However, within just 2 seconds of the first explosion, only 29% remained standing, while 56% had found protective positions. After 8 seconds, virtually all soldiers had achieved some form of cover. The time-on-target system exploited this narrow window of vulnerability by coordinating multiple batteries to fire simultaneously. Each participating battery calculated the time of flight from their guns to the target, accounting for distance, ammunition type, propellant charges, and atmospheric conditions. The Fire Direction Center would broadcast a countdown to all batteries, and each gun crew would fire at precisely the moment that would cause all shells to impact the target at exactly the same time. The mathematical precision required for this coordination was staggering. Fire direction officers had to master complex ballistics calculations that would make a physics professor proud. They had to account for the distance from each gun to the target, the type of ammunition being used, weather conditions including wind speed and direction, atmospheric pressure, temperature variations, and countless other variables. They developed intricate firing charts and calculation methods that allowed them to coordinate not just dozens, but eventually hundreds of artillery pieces in a single devastating strike. The development of radio communications was crucial to this system's success. Unlike the vulnerable telephone lines used in World War I, radio allowed forward observers to move with advancing troops and maintain constant contact with fire direction centers. These observers, often positioned dangerously close to enemy lines, could call in precision strikes and adjust fire in real time as battle conditions changed. The standardization of American artillery pieces also played a vital role. While Germany struggled with a chaotic mix of captured weapons from different nations, America focused on mass-producing reliable, standardized systems. The M2A1 105mm howitzer became the workhorse of American artillery, with crews thoroughly trained on its capabilities and limitations. This standardization meant that fire direction centers always knew exactly what to expect from each gun, simplifying calculations and improving accuracy. This system also introduced the revolutionary concept of massed fires across unit boundaries. Traditional military doctrine kept artillery units rigidly attached to specific infantry formations. American innovation shattered these artificial barriers, allowing artillery to be concentrated wherever it was most needed. American gunners could coordinate the fire of 2 or more divisions in support of a single attack, then rapidly shift all fires to successive attacks by other divisions with unprecedented speed and precision. The scale of these coordinated strikes grew throughout the war. During the Battle of the Bulge, 4 American divisions were supported by 348 guns and a battalion of 4.2-inch mortars, all coordinated through a single headquarters. In training exercises, as many as 72 guns from 3 battalions could be coordinated in what became known as brigade time on target strikes. The psychological warfare aspect of this system cannot be understated. German soldiers, accustomed to the gradual buildup of traditional artillery attacks, were completely unprepared for the sudden, overwhelming violence of time-on-target strikes. The simultaneous arrival of dozens of shells created a psychological shock that went far beyond the physical destruction. Survivors described feeling as though the earth itself was exploding beneath their feet, with no warning and no escape. The system's flexibility also allowed for innovative tactical applications. Artillery could be used to clear helicopter landing zones in later conflicts, with multiple batteries precisely timed to destroy obstacles and vegetation simultaneously. The coordination principles developed during World War II would influence artillery doctrine for decades to come, evolving into the sophisticated fire support systems used by modern military forces. The implementation of the Fire Direction Center system solved multiple tactical problems that had plagued artillery forces throughout military history. First, it dramatically increased the lethality of artillery by concentrating maximum firepower in the shortest possible time. When dozens of shells arrived simultaneously, The psychological and physical impact was devastating. Second, it allowed for unprecedented flexibility in fire support. American artillery units could rapidly shift fires from one target to another, supporting multiple operations simultaneously. A single fire direction center could control the fires of an entire battalion, and higher-level centers could coordinate the fires of multiple battalions across division and even corps boundaries. The system also incorporated advanced forward observation techniques. American forward observers were trained to work closely with infantry units, using radio communications to call in precise fire missions. Unlike the crude observation towers used in World War I, American observers moved with the troops they supported, providing real-time intelligence and fire adjustment. The introduction of improved ammunition further enhanced the system's effectiveness. The proximity or variable time fuse automatically exploded shells above ground, creating devastating air bursts that were far more lethal than ground impacts. When this technology was combined with time-on-target coordination, the results were catastrophic for enemy forces. Perhaps most importantly, the American system emphasized standardization and mass production. While Germany employed a bewildering variety of captured and improvised artillery pieces, America focused on producing large quantities of standardized weapons, primarily the reliable M2A1 105mm howitzer. This standardization meant that American artillery units always knew exactly what fires they could expect, and ammunition resupply was simplified and reliable. The first major test of American artillery coordination came during Operation Torch in North Africa in November 1942, where German forces encountered something that would fundamentally challenge their understanding of modern warfare. German troops, accustomed to the methodical, predictable artillery patterns of their previous opponents, were completely unprepared for what they encountered. Field Marshal Rommel himself noted the devastating effectiveness of American fire coordination, writing to his wife that an observation plane directed the fire of numerous batteries on all worthwhile targets throughout the zone. The German response reveals the profound psychological and tactical impact of this new form of warfare. Captured German prisoners consistently praised American artillery effectiveness, even while criticizing other aspects of American military performance. They spoke with a mixture of fear and grudging respect about the terror induced by sudden, simultaneous bombardments that seemed to materialize without warning. German soldiers described feeling helpless against an enemy who could strike from multiple directions simultaneously, creating a sense that nowhere was safe. During the Normandy campaign, German defensive positions that had withstood traditional artillery attacks for hours or days crumbled within minutes when subjected to coordinated time-on-target strikes. The 2nd Infantry Division alone fired up to 20 TOT missions per night during the fighting for Hill 192 outside of St. Lo, keeping German defenders constantly off balance and preventing them from organizing effective counterattacks. Traditional German artillery doctrine emphasized the quality of individual guns and crews over coordinated mass fires. Their famous 88mm weapons were technically superior to most American pieces, capable of engaging both aircraft and ground targets with devastating effectiveness. German gunners were often more experienced and better trained individually, having honed their skills during years of combat across multiple theaters. However, these individual advantages became largely irrelevant when facing a system that could coordinate the fire of dozens or hundreds of guns simultaneously. The German military's fragmented command structure also worked against them in developing an effective counter to American coordination. Coastal artillery remained under Navy control, while field artillery was controlled by the Army, creating coordination problems that prevented unified responses to American attacks. This division of authority made it virtually impossible for the Germans to develop their own version of the American Fire Direction Center system. Moreover, Germany's chronic shortage of resources and manufacturing capacity meant they had to use whatever artillery they could capture, produce or acquire from allies. By 1944, approximately half of the Wehrmacht's artillery pieces on the Eastern Front were captured French guns from the 1940 campaign. General Hans Eberbach, commanding the 5th Panzer Army in Normandy, noted with frustration that his artillery included weapons from virtually every major power in Europe. French, Russian, Italian and German pieces all mixed together in the same units. This hodgepodge of equipment made standardization impossible, and coordination extremely difficult. German fire direction officers had to maintain different firing tables for dozens of different weapon types, each with its own ballistic characteristics and ammunition requirements. When American forces captured German artillery positions, they often found crews struggling with improvised firing solutions and makeshift ammunition supplies. The contrast becomes even more striking when we examine specific major engagements. During the preparation for Operation Market Garden, British and American artillery fired concentrated barrages that German survivors described as earthquakes of steel. But perhaps the most dramatic example occurred during the crossing of the Rhine River by the American Ninth Army, where 2,070 American guns opened fire simultaneously. This massive coordinated strike delivered over 65,000 shells at a sustained rate of 1,000 rounds per minute, creating a barrage so intense that it was visible as continuous flashes along the entire western bank of the river. General Omar Bradley described this bombardment as representing the pinnacle of American artillery coordination, noting that the precision timing required to coordinate over 2,000 guns across multiple corps boundaries would have been impossible without the Fire Direction Center system. The psychological impact on German defenders was so severe that entire units surrendered without offering resistance, overwhelmed not by superior individual weapons, but by superior coordination and mass. German attempts to counter American artillery superiority focused primarily on increasing the mobility of their guns and improving camouflage techniques. They developed self-propelled artillery pieces and practiced rapid displacement after firing to avoid counter-battery fire. However, these tactical responses could not address the fundamental advantage American coordination provided. The introduction of the proximity fuse in late December 1944 further enhanced American artillery effectiveness. These revolutionary shells exploded automatically when approaching their targets, creating devastating airbursts that were far more lethal than traditional ground impacts. When combined with time-on-target coordination, the results were so catastrophic that German prisoners referred to American artillery as the American secret weapon. Intelligence reports from German units consistently emphasized the demoralization caused by American artillery attacks. Unit commanders reported difficulty maintaining defensive positions when subjected to coordinated bombardments, noting that even veteran troops became reluctant to remain in exposed positions. This psychological warfare aspect may have been even more important than the physical destruction caused by the shells themselves. The story of American artillery coordination represents more than just a tactical innovation. It embodies a fundamental truth about warfare and human achievement. While the Germans focused on perfecting individual components, creating incredibly sophisticated weapons operated by highly skilled crews, the Americans revolutionized the system itself. This transformation didn't happen overnight or by accident. It was the result of years of methodical innovation by dedicated officers who refused to accept that the old way was necessarily the best way. At Fort Sill, Oklahoma, these visionaries created something that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in World War II. The numbers tell the story with stark clarity. During the Battle of Normandy, American artillery fired millions of shells in precisely coordinated barrages that German forces described as earth-shaking and supernatural. General George Patton, never one for understatement, declared that we won the war, and it was largely won by the artillery. When we examine the broader implications, we see that this innovation represented a shift from craftsmanship to system thinking, from individual excellence to coordinated effectiveness. The Germans produced some of the finest artillery pieces and most skilled gunners in military history, but they were overwhelmed by an American system that made the whole far greater than the sum of its parts. The German prisoners who survived these bombardments often spoke of a profound demoralization that went beyond physical casualties. They described feeling helpless against an enemy who could strike with such precision and power that resistance seemed futile. This psychological impact may have been even more important than the physical destruction. Today, as we face new challenges in warfare and technology, the lesson of American artillery coordination remains relevant. It reminds us that breakthrough innovations often come not from perfecting existing technologies, but from fundamentally reimagining how those technologies can be employed. The officers at Fort Sill didn't invent better guns, They invented a better way to use guns. The thunder that erupted from clear skies over Tunisia, Normandy, and dozens of other battlefields wasn't just the sound of shells exploding. It was the sound of the future arriving, of innovation triumphant, and of free nations demonstrating that when democracy mobilizes its creative energies, even the most formidable enemies can be overwhelmed. In those moments when hundreds of American artillery shells struck their targets simultaneously, the German forces weren't just experiencing superior firepower, they were witnessing the power of American innovation, coordination, and determination made manifest in steel and fire. It was the day they realized that the war they thought they understood had been transformed into something entirely new, something they were not prepared to face. The revolution that began in a dusty artillery school in Oklahoma had reached the battlefields of Europe, and warfare would never be the same again.